Welcome, students. Mr. Bockold here. Right now, I am currently somewhere in Southern California, either getting ready to take family portraits with all of the extended family, which would be super stressful. I'd rather be there with you. Or I might even be at the beach. I'd rather be at the beach. Okay, so let's go over some announcements. This week is short, just 2 days, so no article of the week. You're welcome. Now, don't forget, you need to finish your outside reading. That is due next week, December 1st, right before midterm. So perhaps use Thanksgiving break to get caught up on all of those assignments. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over today's lesson. You're going to finish March Book 1, and I'm going to give you a few things. I'm going to review what we read last time to put so it's fresh in your memory, and then I'm going to tell you what to look out for when you finish this book today. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move my face. I am sorry about that. All right, I'm no longer here. All right, so March, you started this book last time, so let's go over some of the main plot points. Okay, so it started off with the end of the trilogy when John Lewis is leading that march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, which eventually led to the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And that's like the crux of the trilogy. But then we go back to John's childhood, and we know that he was a little bit different than his siblings, than his peers. He was heavily interested in religion. He was a very kind and thoughtful boy, and he was fascinated with the New Testament, and he wanted to become a preacher. So he studied the New Testament all of the time, and he really identified with the New Testament. Now, he lived in Troy, Alabama, which is just 50 miles outside of Montgomery, Alabama. He's growing up in the 40s and 50s in the segregated South, and he sees these discrepancies, and he's asking why segregation, why different schools, and he asked his parents about it, and they said it's the way it's always been. Don't get in the way. Don't get into trouble. Now. Um, his uncle sees this potential in him. His uncle is a teacher at a local school. He's also a principal, and he sees John's potential, something inside of him. So he decides to take him on a road trip during the summer. And the two of them get into Uncle Otis's car and they drive up to Ohio. And when they get to Ohio, they're on their way there. They're going through Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, and it can be a nerve-wracking drive through those states in that time. Eventually, they make it up to Ohio, and he sees his uncle Otis, his family, and they're living in a regular community that's integrated. Black and white people are living right next door to each other. Black and white people are going to the same schools, they're eating at the same restaurants, and he sees this as a turning point in his life. My voice just cracked. Don't make fun of me. And he was like, you know what? Things are different in the South. I want to change them. So when he gets back to the South, he is now even more painfully aware of segregation and this doctrine of separate but equal. He sees his schools, he compares it to the local white schools. His school bus is in a state of disrepair. The buildings are old and falling apart. Their textbooks are terrible. They don't have nearly as much funding. They don't even have roads to their own communities so that they can easily access their schools. So this is really, really bothering him. Now, in 1954, we have the watershed case of Brown versus Board of Education. And the United States Supreme Court said that segregated schools across America are unconstitutional. However, many politicians in the South said, you know what? We don't care what Brown versus Board said. They lived in contempt of those, and they swore to their death that they would defy the Constitution of the United States and not segregate their schools or their communities. Now, this drew some hard lines in the sand, and things get quite tense in the 50s and 60s when the civil rights movements are going. We have the murder of Emmett Till. His murderers are brought to trial, they're acquitted, and later on, they all admit publicly to killing this black boy, and they're never brought to justice of this. Now, in the meantime, John is listening to the radio, and he hears Dr. Martin Luther King just 50 miles away preaching at in a Baptist church, and he's inspired. Like, he wants to be a minister. Martin Luther King is a minister, and he sees that Martin Luther King is using what they call the social gospel, the application of New Testament principles on contemporary issues. And this inspires him. He also hears on the radio stories of Rosa Parks. He's listening to the stories from the members of the community talking about Rosa Parks. He's following it in the newspaper, and he wishes he could be a part of it. And he hears that so many different people, 50,000 people, are participating in the Montgomery bus boycotts, and he's captivated by this. And after hearing about Dr. Martin Luther King, hearing the success in the Montgomery story, he was inspired. He wants to be like Martin Luther King. So he's a preacher. He gives his first sermon at church, and he wants to use what he calls the social gospel to make changes in his community. So that's where we left off last time. Today, you've got two things you're going to do. There's going to be two videos. They're both short. I believe they're less than 3 minutes long. They're both about Jim Crow laws. And the first one is just a real brief introduction to what they are, their purpose, and eventually how they were brought down. So take 2 notes on that. So the sub will show those. Take 2 notes on each video. And then the next one is an interview with John Lewis himself, and he's going to talk about what it was like for him to grow up under Jim Crow era laws in Alabama. Then you're going to read the rest of the book. I think it's pages 63 all the way until the end. And you're going to get at least 5 annotations or the screenshots. Now, remember, just because you have 5 screenshots doesn't mean you're done. You have to do both. You have to read all the way up until the end and at least 5 annotations. It's not either or, it's both. So if you finish at like page 85 with 5 annotations, you still have to read all the way until the end. All right, so here's what you're going to look out for in this. You are going to hear the story of when John Lewis meets Martin Luther King for the first time. He is inspired by him. He writes him a letter. Dr. King invites him to his office, and they decide that they were going to file a court case. John wants to go to school, to the local university in Troy, Alabama. However, it's an all-white school. So he tried to enroll. They rejected him. So he talks to Martin Luther King, and he's like, hey, let's go ahead and take this to the court. We're going to challenge this in courts and see if we can get a ruling that it's unconstitutional. The problem with this is, remember, John Lewis's parents, they don't want John to get involved. They want to keep him safe. And because John isn't old enough, the plaintiffs on this case would actually have to be John's parents, not John himself. He's 17. He's a minor. He can't do this for himself. So he's going to have to go home and have a really hard conversation with his parents. Mom, Dad, are you willing to put your name on this case? If you do, it could lead to some trouble for our family. Ultimately, that doesn't pan out, and John goes to another university, I believe in Arkansas. However, in Arkansas, he still, you know what, he thinks to himself, I can still get involved. He reads the comic we read last time, Martin Luther King and the Montgomery story, and hearing all of those stories on the radios, he's inspired to do it himself. And remember, the end of that book says, you can apply this philosophy, this this nonviolent protesting, in order to enact legal changes throughout your community to bring lasting change. So he's like, you know what, we're going to do this. So he gets together with a lot of other people, and they decide that they are going to challenge the segregated restaurants in their college town. Remember, at this point in the South, white restaurants and black restaurants were different. And there was a lot of segregation. So they rally up several other college students. They teach them the philosophy of nonviolence that they learned through Martin Luther King Jr. They talk about it, what they're going to do. They make plans. They go to the Woolworths, and they have a sit-in. And you're going to notice that ultimately it worked. At the end, you're going to find out that it worked. This forced the mayor to integrate the restaurants in his town, but it didn't come without cost. It didn't come without a price. It didn't come without violence inflicted upon them. Okay, so that's everything I have. So remember, 2 notes per video, 5 annotations, read all the way until the end. Folks, have a great Thanksgiving. Enjoy your friends, enjoy family. If you're going to do the shopping, I hope it's safe for you and you're happy. Take care. I will see you after Thanksgiving. Keep reading, keep learning. This is Mr. Bockel. Take out. Take out. This is a lame sign off. Bye.